Hi there, my name is Graham Codrington, part of the team at TomorrowToday Global, and we just wanted to talk to you about a new approach that we have to our leadership development programs. These are programs that we either do as a team at TomorrowToday or more often as part of a broader leadership development program, including when we work with business schools. What we've done is we've taken the definition of a futurist or a futurologist, whichever label you prefer, and we have applied that to leadership. The reason for this is that we truly believe that the best leaders of the 2020s are going to be leaders who are able to think like futurists. They don't have to come and get formal qualifications in future studies, but they do need to think in the way that a futurist thinks. Now, a futurist is not a person with a crystal ball who peers into the smoke-filled orb and comes up with predictions about the future. A futurist is somebody who intentionally builds the capacity to see and understand the meaning and implications of change. That definition, a technical academic definition of a futurist, actually is unpacked then as our leadership program. And each one of the words and elements of that definition is important. And we take it step by step, and each one of the elements of that definition has some activities, some out of the classroom experiences that people can have. Obviously, we can do this in anything from a 45-minute keynote presentation all the way up to a 3-day leadership intervention. It works best as a 1-day program where we are able to help people think differently about what it means to be a leader and to understand what leading with a future-focused toolkit in your pocket is all about. So let me go through that very quickly and give you some idea of some of the activities and learning experiences that we use. So if the definition of a future-focused leader is somebody who intentionally builds the capacity to see the future, the first bit of that is to see. We need to switch on our radars and to understand the forces that are shaping our business. Now, if you know anything about TomorrowToday, you'll know that this is our bread and butter. And depending on what is required in the leadership development program, we can expand this section, which looks at what are the disruptive forces that are shaping our future. We can expand it into a full day experience, or we can reduce it down into just a highlights package. We use two ways that really help us with this. The first is a little experience we call news bulletins from the future. Our team regularly produces short little videos, 2 or 3 minute videos that look like they're inserts from a sort of a BBC news bulletin, but they're from some date in the future, and this sparks people to think about a particular disruptive force or a technology that maybe has shaped the world in the future. So, for example, my favorite one is around driverless cars, and we've got a news bulletin from the future. In 2026, I think it is, the German government announces that if you want to drive on the Autobahn in Germany, you have to be driverless. You may not drive your car on the Autobahn. It must be an autonomous vehicle. And then we push people forward to say, well, if all cars become autonomous, so it's compulsory now to be driverless, then something else might happen as well. And we suggest that cars might be shared at that point. Because if you can't drive your own car, well, then who cares what car you're driving? And we'll go into sort of an Uber system where every car is owned by a car sharing service and every car is driverless. Now, of course, the question then is, well, which industries would be impacted by this? And we get everybody to have a discussion. In fact, a little competition gets the energy going nice and early in the workshop, and people have a competition to see which team can come up with the longest list of industries. And we look at everything from insurance to construction, from the traffic department to A&E at hospitals, from law firms to low-cost airlines. I mean, literally, actually, the real answer to the question is that every industry will be impacted. There isn't an industry that won't be impacted. So, of course, we then speak to the people in the room and we say, well, how would your industry be impacted? Not only directly through products and services, but indirectly through your customers and clients and their changing needs, and even further indirectly through the changing lifestyles of your employees. And of course, there's a huge impact. Now, that's just one example. Driverless cars, we've done everything from 3D printing to the end of plastics, from a person turning 150 years old to a robot taking over as the president of your country. So lots of different things that we can choose, and if there's a particular theme on the leadership program, we can tie into that. So news bulletins from the future, a nice little activity that gets people into the future. The second thing that we use to talk about seeing the future and switching your radars on is our model called the TIDES model of disruptive change. TIDES is an acronym that talks about technology, institutional change, demographics, the environment and natural resources, and social values. And we explain the model to people and we help them to do an analysis of the forces that they feel are going to shape their industry. I won't talk about that one more now. I think many of you who have seen us working have seen us work with this model, and it's a very powerful way for people to identify all of the disruptive forces that are likely to shape their industry in the next 5 to 10 years. So we start by giving people that context. This is the reason we're often used on the first day of a leadership program, to give people that context for change. But we're not just doing it as a list of all the things that are going to change and a list of all the technologies that will disrupt your business. We're doing it in the context of a leadership mindset, our ability to switch the radar on and see the future. Now, of course, we also want to make sure that people walk away with practical suggestions as well. This isn't just about a mindset shift or a catalyzing thought. Leadership development programs should help people to take practical tools away. So we also have a discussion with people about what magazines, what books they're reading, what YouTube channels they're watching, and we get some wisdom of the room, but also make recommendations ourselves, so that people walk away with practical ideas of what can they be doing 10 minutes a day, half an hour a week, to fill their minds with more insights from the future. And the other thing we recommend is that they do a 5 minutes from the future segment in every one of their team meetings. People have team meetings once a week, once a fortnight or so, and we recommend you start your meeting with 5 minutes from the future. Allocate different trends and forces to different members of your team and tell them they're each going to get 1 minute once a month at the next team meetings. And what your team then do is they bring just the headlines, just literally 1 minute, 3 or 4 bullet points. What have you seen since the last meeting? And if you do that, within 2 or 3 months of doing that 5 minutes from the future regularly, you will begin to see trends, and you'll be able to deep dive into the ones that are most impactful for your business. But more importantly, you're developing a muscle. Think of it like going to gym. You start off with small barbells and you develop, and then they get heavier and heavier because you're building muscle. What we're doing with a 5 minutes from the future segment is we're building scenario thinking muscle. We're building a future focused muscle. So anyway, the C part of the definition comes from all of those activities. Not only must we see, but we must also understand the meaning and implications of change. Understanding comes through frameworks, and leaders of the future are going to be collectors of frameworks. Frameworks are structures, formulas, programs, tools that can help you make sense of some very complicated data. We use them all the time. They're ways of summarizing and categorizing and codifying information. So, for example, our TIDES model of disruptive change is a framework, a framework of understanding change, similar to the PEST or the PESTEL model or Porter's 5 forces. So we have a set of models to help us think about the future. We have a set of models or frameworks to help us think about other people, personality profiles like the Enneagram, for example, or MBTI or DISC. We look at generations through the generational lenses of boomers, Xers, millennials, Gen Y, and so on. And what we want to do is we want to help leaders to become collectors of frameworks. These frameworks help us make sense of the world. And here in our leadership development program, we have a few sense-making activities. We've got a few videos that we show that are kind of trick videos. They trick people into looking at one thing and then there's something else to see. Now, there's some very old, cliched, well-used ones like the gorilla walking through the basketball players. We try to use ones that haven't been seen before, including some that we've created ourselves, but they all make the same point, that we need to be careful what we're looking at and how we are seeing it. But again, we do this very experientially in helping people, and it's a little bit of fun as well, of course, as people kind of see one thing and then see something else and realize they didn't have the full framework available to them. The third thing that we do is, if we're seeing and understanding the meaning of change, meaning comes through questions. And we want to help leaders in particular shift their mindset from being people who have all of the answers to people who bring great questions. You know what? If you've got great answers, it doesn't matter if the questions are the wrong questions. Then it doesn't matter what your answers are. And we've got to help leaders change their mindset. I'd much rather work for somebody who has got questions that are difficult to answer than work for somebody who has answers that are difficult to question. Wouldn't you? And what kind of leader are you, actually? This is what we want to get across to people. Here again, we've got some practical tools to help them. We talk about having curiosity conversations that are specifically set up with key people, where you go simply to ask them questions and get their answers. We help people to think about having a question journal, and we show them examples of this, of gathering great questions. Questions that will help them to become better leaders. If we have the time, and we're given the time in our program, we actually encourage them to go out and practice this by having conversations that are made up of questions, and to develop a question journal immediately in the program. Now, we mustn't only see the meaning of change and become better and more curious and be good at asking questions. We also need to understand the implications of change. And implications relates to the fact that the meaning that things have, the meaning that change has, is different for different people. It's different in different markets. It's different in different countries. It's different in different functions within the business. And all of this comes down to an understanding of the importance of diversity. We're absolutely convinced that the best leaders of the 2020s are going to be the leaders who are best capable of developing and managing and embracing and getting the most out of diverse teams. When we talk about diversity, a lot of people can roll their eyes. I think we have a bit of diversity fatigue in companies at the moment. But we go well beyond just looking at the well-worn topics of gender, women in particular, and culture. Although those are absolutely vital, and I don't think a lot of organizations have understood them properly. We want to take people well beyond that, to look at the diversity implications, for example, of personality types, of different generations, of different languages even, and the language that we speak and how that impacts how we view the world. And it's all, again, it's less to do with diversity and inclusion for its own purposes, and more to do with what that has to do with leadership and business outcomes. It goes well beyond BEE or diversity compliance, and even diversity as a social good. And it gets to diversity as a strategic issue and a strategic competitive advantage for getting better business outcomes. Here again, we've got some fantastic activities that we do depending on the time that we've got and the amount of emphasis that we want to place on diversity as an issue within a leadership program. We can either set up the topic so that somebody else later in the program who's doing a deep dive on the issue can have some fertile ground to work with, or we can do some activities ourselves that have a look at diversity and how people engage with diversity. The fifth area moves towards unlearning. So as we move from seeing and understanding the meaning and implications of change, we get to the area of unlearning. The analogy that we use here is important. When you're wanting to paint a new wall, I'm actually just looking as I'm recording this video and seeing that in my study here, the wall is chipped a little bit in one area and needs a bit of repainting. And I actually did a little bit of repainting a while ago and made a huge mess of it because I didn't strip off the original paint well enough. So just repainted the wall. It all looked beautiful for a few weeks, and then of course the old paint began to peel and push through it again. And just as in painting a new wall, you've got to strip the old wall completely. In learning, we need to unlearn, and we need to, in terms of new learning, unlearning, knowing what to strip away, get rid of, is just as important as the new learning. And we don't do this often enough in our organizations. We send a memo and we say to people, there's a new structure, or there's a new approach, or there's a new piece of software. And we don't unlearn enough. We don't strip away enough of what's gone on. Now here we've got a wonderful little example, a little activity that we throw in here. And this is, in fact, there are two of them that we use at this moment in the program. The one is we've actually had bicycles changed to be reverse steering bicycles. You might have seen the video going around of an Australian professor who did this. Basically, when you turn the handlebars in the one direction, the wheel actually goes in the opposite direction. Turn the handlebars right, the wheel goes left. And it's almost impossible to ride. So we bring these bicycles along to the program. We give people a chance to ride them. Everybody's got all of their view of how to do it. Just hold the handlebars straight. Just sit a little bit to the right, sit a little bit to the left, get momentum. Everybody's got ideas about it, but then you actually put them on the bike and it's pretty much impossible. In fact, we've never seen somebody ride these bikes. They're really difficult, because your whole body has got all sorts of muscle memory. There's a lot of subconscious stuff going on here. And the analogy is obvious at that point, that you can't just send a memo to the business to change, because the business has institutional memory. So how do we unlearn? And we use this little experience of riding on bikes. It's a lot of fun outside of the classroom and a little bit of physical activity. We also have another activity, and I'm not going to explain this one in detail because it will mess it up if anybody watches this video. But we have a whole bunch of pencils that we lay out in various patterns on the desk, and then ask people to tell us what number this pattern represents. And there's a little trick to it, of course, where people are looking at the wrong thing. Again, it's this misdirection. And this is a really great activity to help people think about, what are you looking at? What are you measuring? What are you focused on? And it links through some of those themes around diversity as well, getting different people's attention, looking in different ways at different things. All of this helps us to unlearn, learn, and relearn our new information, data, organizational design, etc. So we need to see and understand the meaning and implications of change and intentionally build capacity. Now, intentionally building is around developing future-focused skills. Our team at Tomorrow Today has done some research on this, and we believe that there are 8 skills that are essential for the future of work. Essentially, our research was what is going to happen when the robots come for our work. What work can the robots do? But what work is not going to be done by algorithms, software, machines, artificial intelligence? And that's where we get to shine as people in the workplace. Future-focused leaders need to know what these skills are and help themselves and their teams to develop them. These are the 8 skills here. Again, at this stage, I won't go through them in detail, but you can see the various categories. And again, depending on how much time we're given in the program, we can either just alert people to them, or we can actually go through them in quite a bit of detail and talk about how we might develop each of these 8 skills in turn. The final piece of our puzzle then is to intentionally build capacity. The capacity comes from, we believe, one of the most important things that we say, which is building a culture of experimentation. We believe that any business which is not actively experimenting and building a culture of experimentation won't even be here by the end of the 2020s. The 2020s is going to be brutal to organizations and leaders who don't have the capacity to experiment. And experimentation requires us to be able to be comfortable with trying something, to be comfortable with failing and moving on, to knowing what things can be experimented with and what things need to be done in a more structured business project mindset. And so what we do on our leadership programs is we help people understand what an experiment is, how to build an experiment that won't burn the place down or blow it up if it goes wrong, and how to learn from this cycle of trying, failing, sharing, learning, growing, developing, and repeating again, so that we reach a point of actually getting it right. And more than getting it right, finding the big exponential innovation that will accelerate our companies into the future. So what we have here is we have a definition of what it means to be a futurist that is applied to leadership development and organizational development for the 2020s, and can be delivered as a presentation, but is better delivered through an interactive set of experiences. And I've outlined just a few of those experiences that we can do, and obviously we will customize entirely for the client that we're working with and link into other elements of the program, so that this is an interactive and integrated part of any leadership development program. It's not a chalk and talk, it's not a stand and deliver lecture. It's very experiential with an aim of catalyzing people's thinking. It's not so much about the content being dumped on people. It's a very simple sentence that they walk away with, or intentionally building the capacity to see and understand the meaning and implications of change. That's essentially the content. But what it does is it gives people handles in both an understanding of what that means for both their mindset and their practical leadership activities and capabilities. And it also gives people a real visceral set of experiences that lodge the change in their minds. So from some of those news bulletins from the future and the videos that we show people, to the bicycle experience or the experience with the pencils, these are things that are done deliberately to lodge the learning in people's minds and make sure that they take it back to their offices and their homes. So we would love to work with you in a leadership development program that helps leaders to understand and develop the capabilities that they need to be future-focused leaders. Please connect with us, and one of the members of the Tomorrow Today team would love to talk to you more about what you are looking for in terms of leadership development and how we can help you deliver that to your leaders.